But Russia's aim was to wipe Ukraine off the map. Putin's war of conquest is failing. Russia's military has lost half its territory it once occupied. Young, talented Russians are fleeing by the tens of thousands, not wanting to come back to Russia. Not just fleeing from the military, fleeing from Russia itself, because they see no future in their country.
Stand up.
From a defabricated solar-powered garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, the top 10 reasons you should probably not hand-feed that raccoon. And now, the podcast host who doesn't worry about raccoons because he just hides in the garden shed, Pete Dominic.
Yes, you've nailed me again, Pico. I am terrified of raccoons. Actually, I grew up around lots of them. Even took care of some baby raccoons when they'd been either abandoned by their mother or their mother was killed. And I do have a huge raccoon right behind me. And Pete Co. will confirm that because after I heard this intro, I went and sent him a video of the big old bugger that hangs out behind the shed in the woods there. So really, I'm not afraid of them. I love them. I think they're arrogant little bastards. They're very human-like. They're more human-like than I think some primates. I love raccoons. And so here we are. Happy Mardi Gras, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me. Great to have you here. I have an awesome show with Jeff Jarvis joining me today. I was supposed to have two guests, Jim Fallows, who is a former Jimmy Carter speechwriter and award-winning journalist and writer at The Atlantic, had to cancel at the last minute. But I have a wonderful, almost 45-minute-long conversation with the great Jeff Jarvis of the Craig Newmark School of Journalism in New York City, and always brilliant, covered a lot, his perspective on many things, always great when he joins me. Reminder, Thursday night, we're going to have some surprise guests, but I still haven't booked them. I want to know who you want to join. Who would you like to see have stop by for 10 or 15 minutes? I'm going to pick 3 people that are listener favorites. Who's it going to be? Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. That's this Thursday night's subscriber-only hangout. We've built an amazing community of people. If you haven't subscribed and joined us on Thursday nights, you're so missing out. It really is the best thing I've ever been a part of. So very excited to see you guys this Thursday with some special guests. What is Mardi Gras, by the way, exactly? I never went to a Mardi Gras celebration of any kind. Okay, here it is. The holiday Mardi Gras is celebrated in southern Louisiana, including New Orleans. Celebrations concentrated for about 2 weeks before and through Shrove Tuesday, the day before Ash Wednesday, which is the start of Lent in the Western Christian tradition. Mardi Gras French for Fat Tuesday, but the season actually begins on January 6th and extends until midnight before Ash Wednesday. As Fat Tuesday gets near, the parades start in earnest. Usually there's one major parade each day, weather permitting. Many days have several large parades. The largest and most elaborate parades take place the last 5 days of the Mardi Gras season. All right, well, have a good time if you're down there in New Orleans or having some kind of similar Mardi Gras celebration. Oh, and I didn't even ask about your President's Day. Did you have a good President's Day? Did you do anything for President's Day? Did you do any presidential celebrations? Our president, you know what he did, right? Tell him, NBC's Lester Holt.
Tonight, President Biden shocking the world with a historic trip to Ukraine. The unannounced visit to the active war zone just days before Ukraine marks 1 year since the Russian invasion began. Air raid sirens ringing out as President Biden walks alongside Ukrainian President Zelensky. The trip shrouded in secrecy, the president leaving on a pre-dawn flight and taking a 10-hour train ride into Kyiv. And why Russia knew about it before most Americans did.
Oh, right. Oh, I didn't want it to end. I love that music. It really gets me very, very tense. Well, what was the reaction to President Biden surprising us all? And we woke up and there he was in Ukraine. Well, let's check in with Fox Business host Stuart Varney. He is always a critic of all Democrats.
It would be a game changer. President Biden makes a surprise visit to Ukraine. It was a very well-kept secret. He took a train from the Polish border to Kyiv, and even as air raid sirens were sounding, he was meeting with President Zelensky and then walking the streets in a war zone. Highly symbolic. The president said he wants to leave no doubt about America's support, end quote, for as long as it takes. Those are his words. The timing here is crucial. The president suddenly pops up, he suddenly appears in a foreign capital that is under attack. He is sticking it to Putin 1 year after Russia invaded. The Russians are preparing a big push. The Ukrainians want more advanced weapons to push back. That's what this visit is all about. What will we let them have? F-16s? Long-range missiles? The Republicans are not entirely on board on this, and I wonder about far-left Democrats as well. President Biden has made a bold move. All right, now comes the pushback. China has implied it would help Russia's military. The tiny Republic of Moldova appears to be Putin's next target. Vice President Harris says Russia has committed crimes against humanity. The world seems to be realigning. Russia, China, Iran versus America and Europe. 1 year ago, Western intelligence agencies offered Zelensky a ride out. Russia had started its invasion and was expected to take Kyiv within a week. Zelensky said, no, I'm staying. Just give me bullets. He's still there. My opinion, give him what he wants. Let Ukraine win. That's my opinion.
That's my opinion. All right, Stuart Varney, how about it? Wow, I thought that was a pretty good piece of commentary myself. Coming out in support of President Biden. And Elliot Cohen over at The Atlantic writes, under the title, Biden just destroyed Putin's last hope. The president's visit to Ukraine was a gut punch to the Russian leader. The long-range missiles matter. So do the super-accurate artillery shells, the surface-to-air missiles, and the winter weather gear. The training in English countryside or the muddy Grafenwur maneuver grounds, and the intelligence provided from the eyes in space and the ears on airplanes that circle outside the battle zone. President Joe Biden's visit to Kiev matters just as much as any of these. Other heads of government preceded him, earning deserved credit, but it is an altogether different thing when the President of the United States, who is indeed the leader of the free world, shows up. His words mattered. He pledged our unwavering and unflagging commitment to Ukraine's democracy, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. And even more important, that the United States will stand with Ukraine as long as it takes. He concludes that article by writing, nothing matters more than American leadership. The recovery of the prestige and weight that have been wasted or diffused over the past few decades. We are not near the conclusion of this war, and there is much of a tangible nature that needs to be done to bring the conflict closer to its end. Words and gestures are critical, but only when accompanied by deeds. But for now, by taking a bold step, President Biden has made the future for Ukraine, for Europe, and for the cause of freedom under the law a great deal brighter. Elliot Cohen in The Atlantic magazine. There were some critics. They were mostly House Republicans and other commentators. Congressman Andy Biggs, I'm pretty sure he's an insurrectionist, election denier. He said in a tweet, you should be standing with East Palestine, Ohio, an American town in your own country that needs your help. Matt Gaetz wrote, when our border's in crisis, Joe Biden goes home to nap in Delaware. When Ohio burns with toxic chemicals, Biden's administration says everything's fine. So on President's Day, I'm not surprised that Biden's ditching America for Ukraine. He ditched America's interests since the start of his presidency. They can keep him. That's what Matt Gaetz said. Okay. And one more, Republican Greg Murphy of North Carolina, he tweeted, so it takes 2 years for Joe Biden to visit the war zone he created at our southern border, but then he goes to see another war zone he created in Ukraine. Oh, he created that war zone? Huh. And finally, Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's one more. The U.S. support for war in Ukraine has been like a U.S. proxy war with Russia, but now it's becoming more like a U.S.-China war through Ukraine-Russia war. End it now. And, of course, she also called for civil war yesterday. Marjorie Taylor Greene called for parts of the U.S. to secede. She wants a national divorce between liberal and conservative states. Hard to know what color her state of Georgia is. Also, hard to know who her supporters are. Who are the people that like when Marjorie Taylor Greene says anything or tweets things? Here's CNN's John Berman talking to my former Congressman Mondaire Jones on CNN about this.
Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene wrote on Twitter today, quote, we need a national divorce. We need to separate by red states and blue states and shrink the federal government. She also added, everyone I talk to says this. Congressman, this is a member of Congress talking about secession, talking about splitting the country in half.
She's talking about a second civil war is what she's, there's not going to be a voluntary secession. The last time this was attempted, we got the Civil War, right? And thank God for a president like Abraham Lincoln at the time. This is really strange. It's still not getting, I think, the kind of attention that it ought. She serves on the Homeland Security Committee, thanks to Kevin McCarthy. There will be no repercussions for her. And to be sure, there are plenty of her colleagues in the House Republican caucus who agree with her sentiments, but don't go as far as like saying it on Twitter. How often is she going to be asked to apologize for saying crazy things like this before she is finally expelled from Congress? It won't happen under Kevin McCarthy's leadership, unfortunately, because people like Marjorie Taylor Greene are actually quite influential, not just in that caucus, but in today's Republican Party.
Well, the only thing I would add is that I think congressional reporters and others should be asking every single Republican, elected Republican at every level, if they agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene, if they think we should have a divorce, a national divorce, and separate red states and blue states. My new congressman, Mike Lawler, said he does not agree with that. He wants to unite. He wants the United States. He had to push back against that. All right, well, we're going to have to keep talking about that and keep addressing that, because there's a huge percentage of Republicans that support her, and she supports Donald Trump. And yeah, it's still going on and not going away anytime soon. Speaking of which, you got to hear this. This is George Santos sitting down with that Piers Morgan fella. And I don't know why you would agree to sit down with Piers Morgan, but Piers Morgan basically got him to repeat after him.
Wall Street superstar. I was this, my family was this, and it was all untrue. So I don't categorize these as mistakes. I think that part of your process, of the cathartic process of redemption, if you like, it's got to start from, I've been a terrible liar. I mean, would you be prepared to say that?
Sure. Like I said, I've been a terrible liar on those subjects. And what I tried to convey to the American people is I made mistakes of allowing the pressures of what I thought needed to be done in order to... This wasn't about tricking anybody. This wasn't about... Yes,
it was.
No. Let me finish.
The whole thing was about tricking people.
Let me finish. It wasn't about tricking the people. This was about getting accepted by the party here locally.
It was about getting accepted by the party, because you gotta lie to get accepted by the party. You've seen that there's several other Republicans now that have all kinds of blatant lies apparently on their resumes as well. Some really good reporting about that. But yeah, that's what you got to do to get accepted by the party. What a terrible person. And he's still there. And they should be asked about their support for that fella, too. I also kind of feel like if a politician at any level says, I've been a terrible liar, the very next thing they should say is, therefore, I'm going to resign from my office, because nobody can trust anything that I say about anything, and I've become an international joke. And forever, my name will be used by people who want to exaggerate anything about their lives. It's absolutely wild what is going on. And what else is going on? Quick news dump. Terrible explosion in Ohio, where they're still reeling in the aftermath of the train disaster. Now a factory explosion where 14 people were injured. Apparently one person killed at this point. So things, more bad news for Ohioans. The Project Veritas founder and scoundrel of all scoundrels, a real cartoon villain, James O'Keefe, is out at the organization that he created because he's an asshole. Yeah, really, because employees complained that he was an asshole, basically. I mean, look it up for yourself. I'm not exaggerating. There are a couple Supreme Court cases this week that could upend the internet. I'm going to try to talk to Eric Siegel about those. Another earthquake and aftershocks striking southern Turkey, killing 3 and injuring hundreds just 2 weeks after the massive quake that killed thousands. And here's some good news. How about this? Australian scientists announced Friday, they discovered a protein in the lung that sticks to the COVID-19 virus like Velcro and forms a natural protective barrier in a person's body to block infection. The study, published in the journal PLOS Biology on Friday, opens up an entirely new area of immunology research around this receptor protein. They went on to say, the discovery allows us to better understand innate immunity that helps to protect us during virus invasion and offers new ways for development of antivirals. Yeah, that's why I read that story, just so I could do my terrible Australian accent. All right, folks. Well, that's what I've got for you in the news. And now it's time to get to my guest. He is a big deal. He's done so much in his career. He's accomplished so much in his career. And today we had a really great conversation. He's a national leader in the development of online news, blogging, investigation of new business models for news, teaching of entrepreneurial journalism. He writes an influential media blog called buzzmachine.com. He's authored many books. He's got a new one coming out. Before he went to the Newmark School of Journalism, he did a whole lot as well. He was the creator and founding managing editor of Entertainment Weekly magazines. Worked as a columnist, associate publisher, editor, and writer for a number of publications, including TV Guide, People, the San Francisco Examiner, Chicago Tribune, and the New York Daily News. And I just absolutely love talking to him. Jeff Jarvis, I heard him the first time when he used to call in to Howard Stern. Howard Stern loved having him on the show, and I love having him on my show. Follow him on Twitter, on Mastodon, where we talked quite a bit about that and so much more. I give you the great Jeff Jarvis right now. Oh, he's back. I'm so happy that he said yes.
I'm so happy to see you, old friend.
I'm so happy to see you. I wish I was with you. I wish we were together. I wish I was on your lap.
We'd be doing a man. Oof.
I'm sorry. That was too far, and I apologize, and I'll show myself out, Jeff.
We can at least do a man hug.
I just want you to be like, I want to be your ventriloquist dummy, and I want to go on the road with you. I don't know why that's such a big deal for you. Just move my mouth. I have so much to talk with you about, so let's get right to it. First of all, your student, Julia Jeske, has done very well. That's because you greenlit that and got that whole program funded. Tell us, just remind us about the work that she's done. You introduced me to her, and now she's been on MSNBC. She's been on the Lincoln Project. She got like 40,000 new followers. It's a big deal, and I think it really matters, her work.
It really matters, especially given what we're hearing now about the Dominion case. It shows how much this is necessary. So it goes back. I was maybe on a show with you, Peter, on MSNBC back when they would have called me, which they don't call me anymore. And I would say somebody needs to do a feature called We Watch Fox News So You Don't Have To. Because we've got to show what our uncles are being fed and not fed. And I said this on the air multiple times and rolled eyes, and that was that. But Juliet did great work at our school, the Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at the City University of New York. And she bravely covered the Proud Boys and worked on that. And her capstone project was about these kinds of disinformation forces. So I said to her, what do you think about an idea like We Watch Fox News So You Don't Have to? Mm. And she said, ooh, yeah, really necessary. And I funded her for the first year out of the center that I run, but that's all I did. She did everything. She did a brilliant job of figuring out what to watch, how to record video and present video snippets of it, and importantly, present what's not being there. And then 2 weeks ago, I think it was, she was on Steph Rule's show on MSNBC at last, and did a great job of presenting not only what Fox News feeds people, but what it doesn't feed people, what's not being covered there. And, my view is that MSNBC should turn around and hire her tomorrow, I think full-time, but at least as a contributor. There should be a regular feature on MSNBC News saying this is what the other guys are doing and not doing. And Juliet's the person to do it.
I love it. And I'm going to clip that piece out and put it out there on social media so that they can all see that, because I fully agree with you. And she takes a special person to be able to do that. There are a few people who are doing that kind of work at Media Matters, et cetera, but you got to have a certain kind of temperament, resilience to keep going back and watch that and not get really
she
upset.
And Aaron Rupar are the two amazing ones who will watch stuff. Aaron does more watching things like DeSantis speeches and stuff, but the two of them do it so we don't have to. Show us the parts that matter. And, if you're a young woman doing this, it's a lot worse and riskier, because having covered the Proud Boys as she had, now, covering Tuckums and company, their nasty crews go after people like her. But she has the courage to do it.
Yeah, and she's unafraid. She puts everything you could possibly attack her with out there ahead of time. It's so great. It's really really doing great work.
I'm so glad you've had her on, because I knew you'd click.
Yeah. I'm so glad you recommended her. So speaking of Fox News, Adam Serwer writes in The Atlantic, Fox News lies to its viewers. Its most prominent personalities, among the most influential in the industry, tell their viewers things they know not to be true. This is not an accusation, allegation, or supposition. Today, we know it to be fact. And of course, he's referring to the lawsuit and what we have discovered through discovery, I guess, the legal process. And we get to read. I was up there tonight, I don't know about you, reading all of these texts from Tucker Carlson to Hannity and Hannity to Ingram. And I don't know what to say about it, because I'm worried nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm the same way. My friend Jay Rosen at NYU had a good Mastodon thread just I think it ended about 8 minutes ago, talking about what we've known for a long time, which is that Fox is not and never has been a news organization. It's especially not now. Well, what does that mean? It means that we who are in journalism should be shunning them, should be investigating them, should be doing stories about them, and we never have. You know, it took an effort like a graduate like Juliet to treat Fox as the malign political actor that it is. And now with the discovery of the Dominion case, we have full and complete proof of what Fox is. It lies on purpose. It knows it is lying with malice aforethought. And we've got to do something about them. There have been ad boycotts, and all they have left is pillow ads, but that's not where they make their money. They make the money from cable fees. And, you know, that's worrisome, because if we did manage to get a la carte cable, how many people would drop MSNBC? How many people would drop CNN? Right. Yeah. It becomes a game of what would happen to these. But Fox is being supported by cable channels and also by Rupert Murdoch's ego. And he wants that bully pulpit, and he has it, and he's going to keep it until he dies. And if Lachlan ends up in charge, he's going to make it even worse. It is the most malign influence on democracy in the country in terms of venality and power mixed.
I used to think that Alex Jones and people on the internet were way worse, at least in their content, but Tucker Carlson has almost eclipsed or keeps up with the craziest of the crazy online, and he's on Fox News. So there's that. What about the lawsuit? Have you talked to or read any legal experts that think that I've heard that if Dominion wins, then Fox News would be gone. That's not true, right? If they won, Fox News has to pay $1 billion. Does Rupert Murdoch have that in his couch cushions?
Yeah, or he can get it. It'll stretch out forever. He'll be long gone by the time this is ever done and it's decided. I mean, you think about it. I was thinking about this the other day. If I were on that jury,
I don't know that he will be. I believe he's the true lizard.
He is, but his lizard offspring is worse in some ways.
I'm saying he lived forever.
So, you know, who knows? How do you truly punish News Corp? That's the question, I think, for a jury. If the jury says, yes, there is defamation, there is malice, it passes every test, then what accounts for punishment to a company that size? You know, is it possible to put them out of business? Yeah, it's possible. It's not going to happen, though, because it'll be courts in the future, and Trump's courts, they'll shop it, and the Supreme Court, and watch. There's no justice anymore.
Right. Let me ask you about, did you see this Marjorie Taylor Greene tweet about the need for
divorce,
secession, and a divorce? It's what she really set herself up to be made fun of, because her husband apparently left her and they're getting a divorce. And apparently, as you can imagine, it's kind of ugly. And so she's like, the country needs a divorce. And everybody's like, but she tweeted about this. I'm sure everybody knows at this point. I'm just trying to find it. Here it is. Impeach Biden or give us a national divorce. It's what do we say about this and her?
It's performative lootiness. And it works, right? We're talking about it. It'll get talked about on media. It's the same thing for Trump. We know she's insane. We know it's nutball, but nonetheless, it's going to be part of the conversation. And that's what she wants. And that's what she gets. She wins.
I mean, she wins power in Congress. She seems to have gained a lot more power within the Republican Party in the House.
You know, so I read a paper yesterday called "The Need for Chaos and Motivations to Share Hostile Political Rumors." A really good political psychologist named Michael Bang Peterson in Denmark and two other authors wrote this, where they did 6 experiment studies of people to try to find out why people would share stuff. And basically what it comes down to is that when you get to a certain point of feeling that you have lost or cannot gain status, then you lash out and you want to burn it all down. And that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with people who want to burn it all down. You know, every morning on MSNBC, Joe Scarborough, God bless him, wonders, how can we get a sane Republican Party back? Whatever happened to my Republican Party? What's happening with them? They cover the minority far more than ever the majority in this wistful, wishful way of thinking that sanity will be regained. And we're missing and it's not just Joe, it's everybody in media, are missing the real point here, which is that we have now reached a point, Hannah Arendt and totalitarianism teaching us that there's a portion of society that wants to burn it down. And they realize they've lost. They realize they're going to lose. They're going to be a minority. They don't have the status that they thought they had or think they deserve. They resent that. And the only thing to do is to destroy. So that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene is. The only thing that's unusual about her is she's not a white man. She's a Karen. But there's them too.
Certainly true. Certainly true. Let me ask you about a different subject, all entirely. This is a really important one to me as the father of 2 teenage daughters. I saw this story the other day, and this news came out of the CDC, the survey, about the same time or on the same day of the horrible shooting in Michigan. And I was just trying to say this horrible shooting, and every horrible shooting should get the attention that they deserve and so on. But like the CDC's report is so much more consequential than any one shooting because of how many people are affected by this. And I don't know if that matters to make that comparison. I'm certain that playing down gun violence, it's the leading cause of death, I think, in adolescence. And so we should be talking about that. But the vast majority of teens dying in gun violence isn't these types of mass shootings. Anyway, American teenagers, especially American teenage girls, are increasingly miserable, more likely to entertain suicidal thoughts and act on them, more likely to experience depression, more likely to feel beset by, quote, persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. And your reaction to this is about the reaction to it by certain male writers, including Ross Douthat, who wrote a column about this. I also saw Derek Thompson writing about it at The Atlantic, although I always like his stuff. I'm not sure if you read that. But what were your thoughts on this survey and more specifically some of the male reaction?
Let me ask you first, because my kids are now in their 20s. How do you sense the society of teenage young women?
I think for me it's harder because I don't know if my daughters are atypical, and but they've done really well throughout the pandemic and throughout their adolescence. They're pretty confident and they feel pretty good about who they are and themselves. They definitely have, all kinds of emotional swings in certain periods. But through the pandemic and everything, so I feel like I hear a lot about my friends' daughters and other young women struggling with everything from body image disorders to depression. I absolutely think social media is a huge, huge problem. But I feel like we've been great parents and just, fortunate and lucky in a lot of ways. So I feel skewed about that, but I think about this issue all the time because I certainly see elements of it in their lives and certainly with their friends. I've heard some nightmares about their friends through their parents to us.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that there's problems. How much worse is it? I think is up for question just because society has changed in a couple of ways. One is that we are more open to therapy and being open about feelings now. Witness the reaction to Fetterman versus Eagleton. Eagleton kicked off a campaign ticket because he admitted he was depressed. Fetterman gaining empathy. By the way, that was another Morning Joe moment that they devoted some considerable time to respecting his decision. So there's an atmosphere of being open about mental health challenges that simply wasn't there, Lord knows, when I was growing up. And
you're talking you're talking about Thomas Eagleton 50 years ago. I didn't know that story. I'm just looking that up. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. He had gotten electroshock therapy, and he was dumped as a vice presidential candidate.
Oh, wow. Because people found out that he was dealing with depression.
Yes. Versus Fetterman, who's been dealing with it for obvious effect. And people are praising him. They're not on Fox News, they're not, but sane people are praising him. So that's one part of this. The other part of this, what Ross Douthat did was cherry pick with Jonathan Haidt and other white men like him the causes they wanted to imbue in a crisis in teen girls' lives. And they ignore the fact that they're getting shot and schools aren't protecting them. They ignore, especially for young women, the fact that they have no control over their bodies as they come into an age of sexual maturity. They ignore the fact that the environment is collapsing around them. They ignore all these other things that they don't want to say. They say, well, it must be social media. It must be these damn phones. It's a form of moral panic where you find one cause for all problems and you blame everything on it as the folk devil. And it's especially, here I am, an old white man talking about them, but I think that they didn't go and interview young women. They didn't go and talk about it. Haight's writing a book about this. And he's writing all his Atlantic moral panic pieces. And Douthat just comes along and says, aha, I've found it. I found the problem. It's social media. Let's blame that. There's a correlation in time, so that must be it. Well, there's also a correlation with abortion laws. There's a correlation with realization about the environment. There's a correlation with mass murder and guns getting worse. There's a lot of reasons for teenagers to be depressed today. Number one, they're teenagers. And number two, the world that we're giving them is screwed up in a lot of ways. Yeah. So I just find this almost misogynistic in using teen girls as a prop for your own political beliefs, and it pissed me off.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize. I saw that he had written about it. I started reading Douthat's piece and read Derek Thompson's piece. Jessica Valenti noted feminist tweets. Ross Douthat wrote about the CDC study on teen girls and came to the conclusion that the problem is cell phones. The fact that there's been a 27% increase over the last 2 years of girls who report being raped doesn't even warrant a mention. But sure, go with cell phones. Yeah. Sexual assault, sexual violence, and the rates skyrocketing is a huge problem. I mean, even if you're not a victim of it, if you're concerned about it, that's a huge issue. So
it is, and we need treatment and we need help. And it's, one thing that's so shocking in this country is how hard it is to get mental health help. Shrinks don't take insurance. Insurance doesn't want to pay shrinks. It's impossible to find people. There's of course the issue of stigma. And I saw another story today. I forget where it was, where a young woman, and I think it was the Times, made a trend out of this, had gone on a TikTok talking about her thoughts, talking about what's what, and she got rejected for a sports team in college because of her negativity that she'd shown online. And what's wrong with that story? It ain't TikTok. It ain't the girl. It's clearly the old, I'm betting, male coaches who have no empathy for young people. Pisses me off. On Mastodon, I saw a teacher come in and say, well, the students I'm dealing with today are all mopey and not motivated. Why are you teaching then if you dislike them so much? Our kids, what we're really doing here is we're disrespecting our own children. And that's kind of sick.
All really important, and folks should look into that. I'm going to continue to look into that and talk to people who really know what they're talking about, maybe some that were involved with it.
You know what I would find interesting? I don't know if you want to do this or not, to have your daughters and some of their friends on for kind of a panel.
Been thinking about it, and I finally took your advice and hired an intern who is a sophomore. She's a friend of one of my daughters from camp. She's a sophomore at University of Wisconsin, and that's something I've talked with her about trying to do, even if it's done anonymously. So, I've been talking to a lot of young people. I'm doing a regular series on Gen Z called Gen Series, Jeff. Anyway, it's just the idea of trying to talk to young people about, their lives and living in 2023. But all right, let me go to another issue with you, because you just played host at the kind of Black Twitter Summit last week with leading scholars, pioneers, technologists, journalists. What was this event? How did you get the invite? Very impressed.
So I use some money from the school. That helps. And I was, by playing host, it merely means that I gave the space and used some grant money from Google to pay for dinner. And had the privilege of then sitting and listening. I'm a loudmouth and all these kinds of things. You can tell because I won't shut up on the show. I always talk. At this event, I didn't say a word. I just shut up and listened. When Musk bought Twitter, we had Meredith Clark, who's a brilliant scholar of Black Twitter, has a book coming out with Oxford this year, I think, speak to our engagement journalism class. And I asked at the end of it, I said, Meredith, is there going to be a Black Mastodon? And she scrunched her face and said, no. And then there's I mentioned this guy on the show before, Andre Brock Jr., who wrote a book called Distributed Blackness, which is a really wonderful chronicle of Black Twitter. It's kind of an unintentional sequel. I happen to have the books that I'm writing about it now, to another book called Black Software by Charlton McIlwain. Andre has been talking about how basically you're going to have to pull us out of here. We built something on Black Twitter, and what he talks about is how it was finally a spot where Black culture could be Black culture not under white gaze, speaking in its own terms to kind of hide from white gaze and white power. Yes, occasionally something like Black Lives Matter would pop out, but that wasn't the point. The point was to have a place of joy and real everyday life. And he writes eloquently about that. And so as Musk insanity got worse and worse, I saw him on Twitter say, what are we going to do? So I went to him in DMs and I said, should there be like a get together? And he said, yeah. So I went to Meredith Clark, Charlton McIlwain, Andre Brock, and also a guy named Jonathan Flowers, who I'd read on Mastodon. And I said, do you think we ought to have something? And they all said immediately yes. So they nominated a bunch of people. We helped out with the invitations, that kind of stuff. They nominated scholars, pioneers in Black online space and Black Twitter. We had on technologists. We had two of the people who basically wrote the original Twitter, an executive there who now is the president of Medium. Also, we had Yoel Roth, who was the head of trust and safety at Twitter and had to suffer the slings and arrows of Marjorie Taylor Greene at Congress only last week.
Saw that. It was crazy.
A week ago. We had funders and we had some journalists in the room. And it was an amazing all-day conversation where, I bring nothing to it. I bring no expertise. I bring nothing at all. But I learned a lot. And what was so interesting, Pete, was that immediately what came out was the best and worst of the experience on Twitter. Right? The best is everything Andre talked about having finally a place of joy, a place to call their own.
Yeah.
The problem is that women in the room, including Fashionista Jones, who's an amazing Twitterer and scholar, and others, talked about the hell they've gone through. The misogyny and the attacks and the difficulty they've had. At one point, Fashionista Jones just said, because people are going to be people. And what it reveals is, it was also interesting, by the way, that one of the creators of the original Twitter, the guy who calls himself Rabble, who's now building other things online, talked about how Twitter wasn't built for Black Twitter. It was built for, white geeky guys who go to South by Southwest. And what happened was that Black technologists came in and took over the technology to do what they wanted to do. So now what happens? Now that Musk is there and it's in peril, do you move to Mastodon? Well, there's things that Mastodon doesn't have yet that may be necessary. The reception hasn't necessarily been great. It's easy for me to move as an individual, or you move as an individual, but to move an entire community, to move a town.
Yeah, no, I am so intimidated by that idea that I have to rebuild what I built at Twitter piece by piece, day by day, appearance by appearance. Yeah, I'll never be able to come close to what I did.
I've found it to be actually easier than I thought on Mastodon.
Really?
But again, it's easy for us as individuals to find our individual friends.
Yeah.
But the dynamic of a community or communities plural that exists in Black Twitter is not easy. So nothing necessarily, no eureka moments come out of it. What was also interesting is we had the founder of Mastodon, Eugen Rochko, there via video from Berlin, and a guy who created a fork of Mastodon called Hometown, who's Darius, who's really, really good. And they listened all day. and they learn new things about the affordances that are needed. For example, just one example, the belief is that search is part of the problem. Because you want to go, I want to go get pissed off about people who think of this about guns, and you're going to search, you're going to find anybody, you're just going to pop yourself into their conversations and lives with your bile. So Mastodon purposely degraded search tremendously. What it also means is you can't find people who are like you. You can't organize. You can't do other things.
Right.
So they were listening to these dynamics, and I think learning a lot about that. And I hope the funders were listening too, because Eugen has been the only, until recently, he was the single and only employee of Mastodon. He started in 2018, I mean. The total amount of money he's raised from beginning until now, he said, is about $500,000 to create a service that serves 10 million accounts.
Wow.
Right. Versus the billions and the huge staff that were needed for Twitter and such. It says that we can build new things at low cost that are distributed and open and federated. Will that work for Black Twitter? Who knows? But it's interesting to see what might come next. And I was honored to be able to sit in the room and...
Yeah, it's amazing. Credit to you for organizing that whole thing and platforming that whole thing to get all of those amazing people in the room. That is huge, and you should be given awards for it. But what about Spoutable? What about Christopher Bouzy's Spoutable? Isn't that like a Twitter, like similar to Twitter, created by a black man who is a technologist? He launched
there were
Sentinel.
some people in the room who weren't crazy about it. I haven't used it yet. I'm not sure. I don't know. I tried to invite him, but he didn't respond. There's Isaac Hayes Jr.'s thing, which helps that his father had some money in Black Twitter. Post.news, which I'm not crazy about, has been trying to say, invite black people to come on to Post, but it's kind of performative and quieting down to me. I'm most interested in Mastodon. I think that's where because it is not owned,
right?
Because it can't be controlled, it's not vulnerable to the next nihilistic narcissist like Elon Musk.
I got to talk to you about this other technology that has emerged since the end of November. It started with ChatGPT. And now Bing has something similar, and a lot of people, this is, I think most people agree that this is the biggest, create the most impact since smartphones, since maybe even the internet. And I want to know what you think about the technology in general, but certainly what you think about some of the developments lately. This New York Times journalist who scared the shit out of everybody when he got the Bing AI to basically go pretty dark on him. What are your thoughts?
I'm fascinated by it, but I think media are purposefully, willfully getting it wrong because they want it's more moral panic. They want to say, reporting, what's coming?
The people reporting and talking about the technology are getting it wrong on purpose?
Yes. Kevin Roose knows better. We all know what this technology can and can't do. All you have to do is read a few stories about it. It's not hard. ChatGPT is autocorrect on steroids. It is predicting the next word. My friend David Weinberger, who wrote a wonderful book called Everyday Chaos, which is about this, showed me a piece recently he wrote that's not published yet, but it explains how these things operate. And they look at the entire web and whole kinds of books and all kinds of data and all kinds of stuff, and they tokenize all the words, right? So the word equity becomes one thing, and it maps the relationship of that word equity to all the other words it can find, and on and on and on and on. It becomes this extremely complex network so that when you give it a sentence, it tries to predict the next word. Happy birthday, Pete. I brought you what would you say?
Sex toy.
That's exactly where ChatGPT is going. Yes.
It knows me.
By the way, they think the oldest dildo today.
Where was it? In my drawer?
A Roman wooden dildo. But we're getting off the topic.
What are they doing in my nightstand?
So I'm thinking splitters, but that's another matter. So you work with what you can. So it figures out the relationships of words so it can predict the next word. That's all it does. And when it does that, what it's doing is spitting us back at ourselves. It's saying, well, if I'm biased, it's because I found all this bias in the world, and the words that are related are biased, and I'm going to feed that back to you. So it predicts words. It doesn't deal with fact at all. It has no sense of fact. It has no understanding of fact, no understanding of concept. It doesn't even do math well. It makes up stuff. They call it hallucinating, but it's really fudging. I've seen a couple times where it'll write about real authors and then it makes up titles of books that they think they should write, which maybe they should, but they haven't yet. So a tool that's fascinating. I wrote a piece on Medium about it where I think that it has potential to expand our definition of literacy. You and I are writers. We're talkers. We're not intimidated. You're not intimidated by the mic. I'm not intimidated by the keyboard, but a lot of people are. And I was talking to the Marshall Project, which covers criminal justice and has a lot of incarcerated people it serves. And I was thinking, how could ChatGPT used to help them tell their stories?
Wow.
To help them
That's an
do
interesting
that, right?
idea.
Also, the key to working on these things is writing the prompt, telling it what you want, whether you want back a picture or words or even computer code. So the skill of encapsulating your desire and need into that statement that the computer can understand, that's the next computer programming. That's where you tell the computer what you want. That's a skill we're going to teach. This is all really amazing. But what's happening instead? Instead, Microsoft, wanting to make a splash and beat out Google, puts ChatGPT into Bing, releases it to some journalists. The journalists go on a spree of Bing baiting. They want to bait Bing into being scary or creepy or whatever. So Kevin Roose goes in and he immediately starts, so I want to introduce the concept of Camus and the alternate self.
Yes.
Well, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to go digging around in all kinds of words around philosophy and come back with some stuff. And he's going to respond to it, which only encourages it. And at some point it said, yes, I have an alternative self and I'm in love with you. So then, the journalist says, oh, I found that really freaky, even though the journalist knows better. It's autocorrect.
It told him he was unhappy in his marriage.
Yeah. Because maybe it was trained on soap operas. It was trained on romance novels. God knows what it was trained on to come up with these associations. That's all it is. And it's looking at the plots of things. And if you look at romance, then that's where you're going to go, is divorce, right? Look at Marjorie Taylor Greene. Who wouldn't divorce her? And so then the coverage becomes, oh my God, this is scary. This is creepy. This is bad. Then what happens? Then Microsoft pulls back the tools. So people can't really play with it anymore. And then regulators and government are going to come in and say, oh my God, this is dangerous. I'm going to step in and make noise. And it doesn't produce anything really useful. Microsoft made a mistake putting it up in this way next to a search engine. A search engine should be revealing lists of things it finds credibly. It's not capable of doing that. Microsoft made a mistake. The journalists make a mistake in imbuing in it characteristics and functions that it does not have, putting it up on a pedestal and then tearing it down. The technologists made a mistake in acting like it could do a lot more than it could do and to try to get money and become all important. I think regulators will make mistakes fall on this, and then we get robbed of something that's useful to us. It's interesting that reflects society in a new and different way.
Jarvis, you don't seem to be concerned about this at all, and everybody I talk to is really concerned about it for one really specific reason that it seems almost inevitable, is that it's going to replace all kinds of pretty good paying jobs.
That argument's been made about technology for a long time. I'll go back to when the linotype came in. I happen to be a linotype geek. That set type, not one letter at a time, but instead a line at a time. And the International Typographical Union at the time realized, oh, we're borked. We're screwed. But what they said was, interesting, rather than saying like Luddites, we have to rip apart the machine and stop this from happening, they realized it was inevitable because the cost savings were so great. Not just cost savings, it allowed newspapers to expand in their scope, more advertising, more space, more news, more sales. They realized that it would end up bringing more jobs in. But they said, we want those jobs to be our jobs. We, the ITU, are going to control that damn machine. You are not going to hire other people to do it. We're going to do it. And that's what happened. 30,000 typographers lost their jobs, but they gained back more jobs in the process. Now, fast forward a half century later in the 60s and 70s, when cold type came in, when hot type lead was replaced by photographic means of making type. And I'm old enough that I was around for a lot of this stuff. And what happened this time? This time the ITU said, no, F you, keep those machines out. It led to the biggest strike in New York newspapers. It killed 6 of 9 New York newspapers. It ended up being the death of the ITU as a union and a labor force. So your choice is to try to forestall this change and say, oh my God, it could get rid of jobs, or to say, let's learn and make those jobs ours. And this goes back to the political discussion. Is a lot of people in America aren't educated enough. We're fighting education. We're fighting this kind of training. The Republicans savor a lack of education. As Donald Trump said, I like the people who are dropouts. And so that's not a wise strategy for the future here.
You don't think it's different this time?
No, I don't. I really don't. In fact, I think that it opens up more possibilities than it closes. I think it brings more people in to be able to illustrate their ideas in words and images. It brings in more people who are able to program computers to do what they want to do. It gets rid of drudge work. In some ways, AP and Reuters have been using this for years to write sports stories and financial stories. And, years ago when I saw this first coming out, I asked a young sports writer whether he was scared of this. He said, no, I hate writing high school game stories. I'd rather write more interesting stuff. We got to write that stuff to get the kids' names in the paper so the parents buy the papers. Okay, fine. Let the machine do it. Let the machine do it is not a bad path here. No, I don't think this is anything to be scared of.
Okay, you heard it from Jarvis, folks. Nothing to be worried about.
Calm down. It's all right. All right. I, for one, welcome my new Chat GPT master.
Oh, really?
Yes.
You make it sound really, really great. Tell me about, I have not followed this closely enough, and I was just trying to catch up because I know you have been, and I wanted to talk about it with you. The New York Times coverage of trans folks and what everybody is really up in arms about. There's so many people. I talk with trans people on the show pretty regularly. Not pretty regularly. I've talked to Jessie Gender a few times. And what is that? Virginia Assemblywoman. I'm trying to talk directly to folks about their thoughts on things. I don't pay as much attention to the coverage of it. I always feel like it's so overblown because there's really not that many people that identify necessarily as trans. And I think people just don't understand it. And I just don't, it's so exhausting to me and disappointing to me that we're in this place. Nonetheless, we are. What's going on with New York Times coverage? Why is everybody so upset?
So there was a letter that was sent by, I think, more than 1,000 contributors and staff of the New York Times on February 15th, complaining about the coverage, pointing out that there have been 15,000 words of front page news Times coverage debating the propriety of medical care for trans children. The one that went way over the edge for me was there was a story saying that, oh my God, this child was in school and was coming out with a different identity in school, and the parents weren't told. So you can guess what the reflex there is. Oh my God, the parents should be told, and the kid should be stopped, and the school should be stopped. Well, why? Why? I mean, how many young people try out all kinds of identities in schools? But this is now the subject of, I'm going to use the phrase again, a moral panic from the right. They need a folk devil. They need somebody who's ruining our culture and our way of life and our morals. And right now that's trans people. And they've demonized them to the extreme. And the Times is going along.
We had a kid tell us, fully committed, don't know if he was mentally ill or he was doing a bit, but for like 2 years in high school, he was a vampire.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know you're not comparing those two, but it's somebody.
No, I'm saying like
their own identity. No, to decide what they want to be.
Yeah, I'm certainly not comparing them. I'm saying that what you said, people try out all kinds of different codes. They switch into all different things. And that's really, I think it's important that you experiment.
Yeah, and I think what's more telling to me is how we're moving past a binary world of specific descriptions, and people can be fluid in many ways. And I welcome that. I think that's wonderful. So this letter went to the Times, and the response came from the current editor of the Times with a message to the staff. I don't know if I can find this again, excoriating anyone who from the staff had signed this letter and saying this is advocacy and this is wrong, and we have an ethics policy about attacking your fellow journalists, rather than listening, rather than saying that 1,000 contributors to the New York Times and thousands of readers, including me, I signed the letter too, said there's something wrong here you've got to examine and look at. The Guardian has not been perfect on this topic either, but they had a very good column today saying just this, that the Times has to examine itself and examine what's going on here rather than just punching back. And especially in this time when the right wing is choosing to turn trans young people, gender fluid young people, into the folk devil of their moral panic. It is more important than ever for news organizations to stand back, not be used, defend those who need defense, be empathetic to people who aren't getting empathy from much of the country in power, speak back to that power. But instead, the New York Times has been saying, no, we cover both sides of everything. It's okay. We'll give Emily Breslin huge amounts of space to say this is controversial to this treatment. Well, of course it's controversial. We already know that. Instead, why don't you, it's just like Ross Douthat and teen girls. Rather than talking to them, listening to them, understanding with them, empathizing with them, instead you treat them as objects in a larger political battle. And it's offensive and it's wrong. And, over the years, I've loved the New York Times for so many reasons, but I just more and more, I just get more upset with them.
Yeah, I really appreciate you explaining that to us. I've been, hesitating or procrastinating to read all of what has been going on there. I'm surprised. I'm a big fan of Emily Breslin. I don't know what she wrote. I see that she had a couple columns here about gender therapy.
The battle over gender therapy and kind of regrets about it.
People having going through gender therapy and they themselves having regrets about it, or
some of the people who the expert sources. GLAAD has been involved with this. Others are involved with this. I have not read all of the coverage. I have not seen it all. I've read some where it goes over the top for me, and I don't want to read it. Maybe I should. I have lots of people I follow on social media who are trans, who educate me about it. Our own students. Last year, we had quite a number of trans students in our journalism school. Wow. It helps immensely everyone in the school to learn more. But I'm one of those old guys who's having problems with pronouns, right? Yeah, the habit in my mind finds it difficult to say they in singular, and that's my fault. And that's what I've got to learn, and that's what I have to do. That's the smallest of it. But it symbolically is an important starting point to recognize that we all have to be open to other perspectives.
Yeah. Yes, and you always are, and it's one of the things that I so appreciate you for. Thank you very much for joining me. I love our talks. I love listening to your thoughts and views and things, reading everything that you're writing, and so does everybody else. We honor you, sir. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Pete.
All right, there he goes. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Jarvis on Twitter, on Mastodon, buzzmachine.com, and find him at the Craig Newmark School of Journalism and send your children there. Great school, great guy, love talking to him, and I am very grateful whenever he joins me. That's all I've got for you today. Looking forward to bringing you more tomorrow because I'm here Monday through Friday, and I'd love to know what you want to talk about, who you want me to talk to, and always send me your ideas. standuppwithpete@gmail.com. Let me know who you want me to invite to the Hangout Thursday night, and join us there. If you're a subscriber, you'll be getting the invite. You should be. If you're not, let me know, and we'll find another way to send it to you. John Carroll, take us out. JohnCarroll.org. Thank you, Odessa. Thank you, Pete Coe. Thank you to you for listening and subscribing and writing a review and giving me 5 stars and all that jazz. All right, bye-bye.
Stand up, you gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. This is the place where every lost child they were in with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand.